Welcome back. It is time for Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Also, you are listening to us on The Bet in Las Vegas on the radio. Yes, Odyssey has radio stations in Las Vegas, 5 of them, and they're very successful, by the way. And we're glad to be on the air there as well. And I say we because my partner in crime here, Moe Moton, he's the senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report, also Raiders columnist at sportsnot.com, where you can also catch my stuff. Yeah, I work there. I do some video. I do a little writing. I do a little bit of that. But you need to follow Mo on the X, on x.com. MoeMoton. For those watching, Mo's giving you an X with his hands. That's nice. It's better than the alternative. You can also follow me on x.com at LVGully. And the show is SNB Today. All right, Mo, guess what? There's whispers. There's things happening out there. The fallout of Sunday night's brutal loss, and I say brutal not because of the score, but because of how they lost and how they performed, the loss to the Steelers, things are starting to get a little weird here as we do this Raiders season, only week 3. I thought the drama wouldn't start till, I don't know, maybe week 10, 8, 9, something like that. Here we are, week 3, Chargers coming up this weekend in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of whispers, a lot of reports from insiders, including our good friend Hondo Carpenter over at SI, who has gotten some heat from his readers that I can tell, but good for him for doing what he's supposed to do, which is be objective, and saying that, hey, no, Josh McDaniels hasn't lost the locker room, but there's some stuff going on, and it might be down the road. Mo, have you seen this stuff? What are you thinking is going on here? It's not a surprise, is it?
Look, I'm out here on the other side of the country, minding my own business. I didn't hear any. I haven't heard any whispers. If you haven't noticed, I haven't been active on social media because I've been preparing for my own shows. But let's be honest here. If your team goes 1-2, losing 2 consecutive games, after, a lot of people wanted Josh McDaniels out after last year. You blew 5 double-digit second-half leads last year. You bring in certain guys that are no longer on the roster after you've given them contracts. People have already been questioning Josh McDaniels. So it wasn't going to take till week 8 or 9 for the whispers and the things to start, people to start chirping. It was going to happen as soon as they had back-to-back losses, which has happened. Now, let them not be competitive against the Chargers. If the Raiders get blown out, in their second home in Los Angeles, you want to talk about whispers and chirping and things going on? You wait and see what happens if that's a blowout game.
Well, and it's interesting because what Hondo said, and there's some others who have said it too, and I'll get to some of these comments from some national pundits as well. He's right, and it's exactly what we were saying on our show on Tuesday and what Murph and I said on the postgame show on Sunday night or early Monday morning, East Coast time, was that you now have this sample size of games. Josh McDaniels has coached 20 games for the Las Vegas Raiders. And what are you seeing? Are you seeing improvement? Well, you should not, in my view, you should not have your worst performance in game 20 as a coach. I mean, plain and simple, right? I mean, you get better as time goes on. And so the whole field goal fiasco, all of that stuff has gotten us to this place. So there's this chatter out there, there's this talk about it. And again, the players aren't saying this, and exactly what he said. He hasn't lost the locker room, not yet, okay? But clearly there's some troubling signs. The Davante Adams comments, which, by the way, on Wednesday, I'm going to read this to you, Mo, too, because you probably haven't seen it yet, but the transcript from it is that, Vinny Bonsignor, our good friend who was just on a couple weeks ago, asked him about, hey, you're a leader. You have to say tough things sometimes. Did what you say Sunday night resonate the way you needed to resonate? So obviously he knew he was talking to somebody. And Davante Adams said, quote, for the people that I needed it to, yes. The rest of the people, it's no surprise. It's no secret that I truly don't care what people think, as long as people know that it's intended to understand who's intended to understand the message. And he goes on to specifically say that he wasn't talking to the coaches of the front office. He was talking to his fellow players. And he actually chastised us in the media a little bit and saying, you guys take this. It's not just the coach's fault. It's the team's fault too. We're responsible. for how we play on the field. So, and you would expect that out of a guy like Davante Adams, who's an amazing dude and an amazing receiver. But nonetheless, the fact that you're having conversations like this in week 3, Mo, that is never a good sign.
It's never a good sign. And again, I said this on, what was it, Tuesday, that a lot of the things that we're hearing from Raiders players and coaches, we heard this last year.
Yes.
And I think Davante Adams kind of said, we had all last year to figure it out. He said, I don't have time to go through a whole season and figure it out now. And that's the comment basically that media outlets are hanging on to say Davante Adams might ask out before the trade deadline. I don't think he's there yet. I think if it was at that point, if he gets silent, I just want to give people just a quick parallel analogy here. When you're in a relationship, right, usually when your partner screams at you, it shows they care, right? When you have to worry is when they go silent. When you do certain things and no reaction, they've already checked out. When Davante Adams has nothing to say at the podium or in front of a microphone or 2 reporters, I think that's when you have to worry, because that's when you worry about, oh no, is he checked out? Is he not bought in anymore? Because I think right now he's still bought into the process and saying, look, I'm going to do my best to make this thing work. But if he goes silent after a loss, that's when you should worry about him wanting to leave.
Exactly. And you're hearing these conversations, and that's what it is. And you can't, I'm not going to bring them on the show, some of the things that I have heard from people locally in Las Vegas around the team, because I can't verify them. So it would be irresponsible for me to do it, because otherwise it's just chatter. But some of the other points that are being made here about to your exact point, which is, heard this last year. Well, we got to get better. Well, when are you going to get better? If you're going to get better, then you should have gotten better already. You supposedly needed to blow guys out in order to improve your roster. You got, quote unquote, your guys in, and the results aren't better. Now, I know it's only week 3. Now, if they go down and beat the Chargers and play a good game, some of this will be forgotten for a little bit, right? But it's a recency. I keep telling people they're 1-5 in the last 6 games dating back to last year. That is not a good, I think, indication that things are going the way. And you read Hondo's story from today up on SI.com about how guys are getting tired of working so hard and saying, hear the process, or keep the process, stay to the process, trust the process, and the process isn't working. So imagine, Mo, I tell you, hey, you just got to keep doing this on the podcast and we're going to be good. And then the podcast just languishes and languishes and we don't get any more new listeners and there's no new revenue coming in and all this jazz. You kind of start to say, hey, wait, Scott, dude, I've been doing everything we're supposed to do and it's not working.
You know what this reminds me of? And I think I've said this before. This reminds me of Matt Patricia in Detroit. I don't know if you remember, but Matt Patricia almost lost the locker room within the first 3 weeks of the season one year because Detroit players were starting to complain. We're spending all these extra hours putting in work, and we're not seeing the results. Anytime you have players go the extra yard and they're not seeing the results, you're going to get people chirping. You're going to get pushback. I'm not saying the players have said anything to me, but that's human nature. If you're not seeing results, you get upset, especially if you're putting in a whole lot of work. The other thing I want to say is you said the Raiders are 1-5 in the last 6 games. I'll take it one step further. Josh McDaniels' record, he's 18-30 as a head coach. 18-30. You know what that is? That's about 38% win percentage. That's not. I understand. He had a stint in Denver, and that was over a decade ago. I understand that, but since he's been with the Raiders, what's his record been? What is that? 7-13.
7-13.
So he's almost doubled his wins but losses. Almost. If he loses to the Chargers, 7-14, double amount of losses as he has wins. At some point, players are going to question it. I don't know if you remember this guy, but remember I asked Brian Baldigan when he came on with us the first time before the draft. I said, at what point do the players start to tune you out? At what point, how many times do you have to lose before a player starts to say, this guy ain't it as a head coach? And we've had this question plenty of times. Is Josh McDaniels just a good play caller, offensive coordinator? Can he be a leader of men? And so far, the question is still out. The jury is still out because his team, again, losing twice as his Raiders team, losing twice as many games as they win on his watch.
Yeah, and with the couple minutes we have left before this first break, Mo, and by the way, coming up after the break, Mo's going to jump out and Ryan Dyrud from the LA Football Network's going to join me to talk about the Chargers, and then Mo will be back for the third segment. But you look at the situation with Jimmy Garoppolo too, right? And you were very vocal about this Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and you should be, and we still should be, which is it's a flop so far. It's an absolute flop. You cannot find any silver lining there. I don't care about a good touchdown pass or a good pass here or the first down run that he had against Denver. Great stuff. Okay, fine. But overall, what you did, you got rid of a quarterback. Okay, fine. No problem with that. That's a decision you made. That's good. You bring in Jimmy Garoppolo instead of Mo's guy, Baker Mayfield, and it's flopped. And now he's hurt again in week 3. Okay, so who owns that? I told you, Mo, do you remember the show before the season started? And I told you this. I said, it's like Vegas. He's got all his chips. And I thought Josh McDaniels putting all his chips into Jimmy G's corner. He's betting his future on Jimmy G. That's what I said. I truly believe that. And look, guess what he did? He hit snake eyes and he's losing his chips.
Here's my issue with Jimmy G. I'm not going to even talk about the injury because I'm not going to take a victory lap over someone getting hurt.
No,
right?
of
We
course
already
not.
knew what his injury. We already knew what Jimmy G's injury history was. My problem with Jimmy G is he's not what was advertised. He was
Correct.
advertised as this efficient quarterback who's going to take care of the football, right? He leads the league in interceptions. He's doing anything but taking care of the football. And that's before he got hit in the head late in the game. I played the clip on my Bleacher Report live stream. I believe it was the hit from Minka Fitzpatrick that probably put him in concussion protocol. Before that even happened, he threw picks. Like I said, he leads the league right now in interceptions. This is not the Jimmy G that was advertised as that high-level game manager who, once if the game is close, is going to put you over the top. This is the Jimmy G. This is a version of Jimmy G that's going to cost you or lose you the game. So, which is the complete opposite of what he was supposed to be. And I said this again. I'm going to say it now. Different team, different supporting cast, different results.
Of course. Yeah. And not only that, but you talk one of the interceptions against Pittsburgh. It's easy to watch the film after the fact. We're not the guy on the field making the split-second decision. But he had 2 receivers open, including one that probably could have broken for a touchdown. So, again, it shows a decision-making process or a lack of vision on the field right now. I don't know why. Can't explain it. But that's just how it is. So it's you have coaching miscues again, as I call it, coaching malpractice, and Jimmy G is a flop so far. So you have that, and I know all the people who wanted to keep Derek Carr are doing victory laps over that, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, it hurts your team. So we'll see what happens. All right, Mo, we're going to take a break, and then I'm going to come back with Ryan to talk a little bit about the Chargers, and then after that, we'll get back with Mo. We'll close out the show, talk about the Charger game and anything else that might be on his mind. And we'll also plug all the stuff coming up this weekend. That's right. Bleacher Report Lives. You got other stuff going on. We'll talk about that when we come back. All right. You're listening to Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast, also heard on The Bet in Las Vegas. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Silver and Black today. This is the game day edition. That's right. We're getting geared up for the Raiders going down to Los Angeles, SoFi Stadium to take on the Los Angeles Chargers. And by the way, Mo will be back, Moe Moton, stepping out for just a minute, and we're going to welcome in our guest now. And when we want to talk about the Chargers or the Rams, we only go to one place, and that is the LA Football Network. Ryan Dyrud, who joins us now. Ryan, let's talk a little bit about the Chargers. So, I mean, listen, this past Sunday, the defense holds in a goal line situation, right? That's new this year for the Chargers. Mm-hmm. And they win a big game in Minnesota, a game they really needed to have. Talk about a little bit the feeling around this team coming out of that. Obviously, the offense has been putting up big numbers and did again, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But Brandon Staley gambles again. Crazy. Mm-hmm. This guy, it's crazy to just watch this. But anyway, he gambles again, but this time the defense comes up big. What's the feeling around the Chargers? Such high expectations as there has been for several years, but they got this win. How bad did they need the win, and how much has it meant for not only the Chargers and Staley, but also the fan base there?
Well, Scott, first, thanks for having me. As always great catching up with you and love your work. So I always love doing these weekly clashes. But the feeling is sigh of relief because, as you alluded to, this was an absolute must win. I think we're seeing through 3 weeks that this Dolphins team in Miami is pretty dang good. And so, didn't like seeing the defense give up 36 points, but hey, a 36-34 race as it will, you can kind of swallow that now, seeing how good the Dolphins are. That week 2 loss was much more of a gut check because that was a game these Chargers absolutely should have won. They had opportunities at the end. The defense had an opportunity to stop them before, having to go to overtime, and they weren't able to get it done. And then Minnesota, yeah, they were an 0-2 team, but I think this was a battle of two of the best unbeatens in football. When you look at the Chargers and Vikings, both being 0-2, both being playoff teams last year, their head coaches are best friends, both sat at the same table at Coach Sean McVay's wedding. So a nice, fun rivalry there. And Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen played absolutely lights out. We could get into the running game, which I wasn't a huge fan of how they kind of abandoned that. But when Herbert's slinging at 40 or 47, you go with what's working. And the defense, as you alluded to, finally came up big goal line stand. Staley gambles on that 4th down on their own 24-yard line. Unfortunately, the gamble didn't pay off. I actually didn't hate the decision, but I know a lot of people did. But he put it on the backs of his defense, and they came up big at the end there. So, it was one of those where they were able to finally buck the trend of charging, if you will, after the last kind of 3 weeks, dating back to the Jacksonville game, and get back in the win column. So, big relief, Chargers land, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Staley is not one for people who have weak stomachs. That is to be certain. He is a polarizing figure in the NFL because of that. A lot of folks, a lot of coaches, a lot of, I think, people respected around the NFL who comment on the NFL continue to hammer him for it. But it certainly worked for him in this situation. You talked about and mentioned the run game and the offense with the Chargers. Clearly, Justin Herbert just, doing what he's doing. He's the second highest paid player in the NFL for a reason, and he continues to put up the big numbers. He's been missing Austin Eckler for the last 2 weeks, unknown as we record this. If he'll be back, doesn't look like it, right? But not only that, to your point, you miss a big piece like that, it's always going to hurt you, right? But in Minnesota, and we've seen this a couple times this season, it seems as though they go away from the run very quickly. That puts all the pressure on Justin Herbert, who stood up and did it, right? He did what he had to do, but that's not always sustainable, depending on how the game unfolds, depending on matchups and whatnot. What's going on there with the running game? Why do they move away from it so quickly? And what's the answer for them to maybe commit to it more and make that offense a little more balanced?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, back in my glory days of high school, I played receiver. So you think I would love this aired out at all times, but I'm more of I guess an old spirit where I'm all about the running game. We cover the Rams too, and you see Sean McVay completely abandon the run in that Monday night game against the Bengals, and the Chargers did this against Minnesota, a Minnesota team that gave up 250 plus yards to the Eagles just the week before. And granted, the Eagles are a great running team, but when you see 250 yards in one category, you should probably go after that style of gameplay and style of offense. And Scott, I don't know. I love Kellen Moore. I love the hire. I think he's a great offensive mind. But we saw times in Dallas even where with that double-headed attack with Zeke and Tony Pollard, great rushing attack, and then all of a sudden they'd have Dak sling it 50 times. So it's this new mantra in the NFL. It's almost like, and I mean no disrespect, because I say many times on my show, I never want to pretend to be smarter than these coaches because I'm not. But when you look kind of at common sense, it's almost like sometimes these coaches just want to buck the trend that they have to run the ball. Like they want to prove like I can beat you the way I want to beat you and not through doing it a simple way. Like they almost make it harder than it has to be. Now it helps having Justin Herbert, and obviously it worked out for them in this game. And as you mentioned, no Austin Eckler. I did hear as of literally like 10 minutes ago, he is practicing in a small capacity today. Now, I think he's still a ways off from playing, but at least he's padded back in practice. So maybe he's trending in the right direction. But, when you have faith in guys like Joshua Kelly and Isaiah Spiller and Elijah Dotson, who had a tremendous preseason and training camp, you like to see more than, 15 carries. So, I think those are one of those things you kind of have to get back to. And, against this Raiders team, we'll see if they do that. But, when you have the big arm quarterback and you're paying him $52 million a year, maybe that's just why they decide, this is what we're going to do. And until you stop that, we're going to just do it play after play.
And how much of that, Ryan, has to do with the Chargers offensive line? We know they've only given up 24 pressures. It's 6th best in the league. They're also tied with the Raiders of all teams for 5th best as far as pass protection goes. Is there issues up there? I know Lindsley's done well. I know Pipkin's doing well. Maybe at center, there's probably the weak spot there. But are they having issues up front running the ball, or is it simply them just not committing to it?
I think it's just simply them not committing to it. I mean, in week 1, they ran for over 240 yards against the Dolphins. Obviously, having Austin Eckler helped, and I think he broke one for like 50, so that always pads the stats a little bit overall. But, and then week 2, I think they go up against a front in Tennessee. Tennessee, for all their shortcomings on offense, I mean, they have probably one of the most underrated defensive fronts in all of football. So, it was a little tough sledding running, but I don't think that should have been detrimental to the psyche, I guess, of Kellen Moore and to this offensive line, because this offensive line, has played great through 3 weeks overall. And I think if you ask any offensive lineman, they'd prefer to block it in the run game than they are in pass pros. So, getting guys like Rashawn Slater and Jeremy Sawyer and Zion Johnson, and obviously you mentioned Lindsey and Pipkins, I think you want those guys moving bodies up front, making holes for these backs. And it gets you kind of into a rhythm, gets your offense in a rhythm. And also, speeds the game up in a way that keeps your defense off the field, and a defense that has struggled. They looked better last week, but obviously we know all the storylines of them struggling in 2 weeks. Like, you probably want to make it so you don't have to have them on the field as much, and you do that with the running game. So I don't know the exact reason for it. We'll see if it changes. But I definitely don't think it has anything to do with the offensive line maybe playing at a lesser capacity than we expected. So we'll see. Obviously going up against the Raiders defensive front is probably, a little different. Max Crosby, obviously that's a storyline we'll get into, I'm sure. But outside of that, there's probably not a huge. It's probably leans more on the pro side for the offensive line, is what I'm trying to say, outside of Max Crosby. So they should be able to run the football on this team.
Yeah, the Raiders have not figured out how to pressure the quarterback yet, and that's not good when you have a quarterback who slings it like Herbert does. Now, the defense. We talked about the defense. We talked about some of these dating back to last year, and of course, I won't belittle or belabor, the Jaguars game in the playoffs. But clearly, defense has had trouble late in games. Getting off the field against his team. But you have Bosa, you have Mack, you have Tuli Tuipulotu, the rookie who's doing really well. Mm-hmm. But yet they're giving up all this yardage on the ground. Now, the Raiders, with the leading rusher in the league last year in Josh Jacobs, they should be able to run the ball. They have not been able to run the ball. So they're probably looking at this Charger game and saying, wow, okay, finally we're going to face a team we should be able to run the ball against. What's the issue up front there for the Chargers and being able to stop that run with all that talent they have up front?
Yeah, it's so interesting because they do have all the talent in the world. And you look at Sebastian Joseph Day also, and Austin Johnson, and Morgan Fox has played great. One big thing before getting into kind of schematically and maybe gap integrity, but missing Eric Kendricks the last 2 weeks was certainly a big a big miss, if you will. Kenneth Murray, I thought, played really well. But when you sign Eric Kendricks, you let Drew Tranquil go in free agency because of it, and not having him those last 2 weeks, I think certainly hurt and was detrimental to stopping the run, because that's the big component of why they wanted to bring him in was leadership, run stopping ability, side of the sideline presence, and whatnot. So I think that is part of it. The other part, I don't know if it's just gap integrity and just not, holding your blocks or doing your job. When you have so much star power sometimes, Scott, and I'm not saying this from an aspect of actually talking to these guys face to face, but we've seen it before. When you have so much star power, sometimes everyone wants to play hero ball in a way and not just do their defined role. If they're setting the edge, set the edge. If you're the A gap presence, make sure you're in that A gap. And I always go back to this story to last year's defense. And it's so interesting when you look at last year's defense, because they were struggling across the board through the first half of the year. Their big turning point was that Miami game, kind of. And then they really, up until the Jacksonville game, the defense played different. And the reason, as interesting as it is Derwin James, arguably the best safety in football, certainly probably the best player on this Chargers defense, got injured and goes out. And for whatever reason, the defense played better without Derwin James. And I liken it to, they found out, like, okay, we can't just rely on this all-world guy where we can't all be running all around kind of with like chicken with our head cut off. We have to be gap sound. We have to do our job exactly. And when they did that, they were very successful. So I think part of that in this run defense is maybe guys just not sticking to their exact mantra of what they're supposed to be and trying to do either too much or relying on someone too much instead of just focusing on what's ahead of them. So we'll see if they get that straightened out. I thought the secondary was better last week. I know we haven't got to that part yet, but it certainly wasn't great still. But when you play Justin Jefferson, you're only going to slow him down so much. And they stopped him in the first quarter and then he took over after that. But I think it's just more, focusing on your job at hand.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you now we turn kind of the page and we look at this matchup between these two teams. The Raiders on offense coming in, this was a team that has the fifth most cap dollars devoted to the offense. This is why Raider fans are tearing their hair out right now. And of course, Jimmy Garoppolo in the concussion protocol as we speak, not sure he will play, which adds another dynamic, but he's been playing and he hasn't been playing well. 29th ranked offense, clearly not playing well. But you look at the Raiders, the strength that they've had in the past and should have now is that running game, which we just talked about. But in the passing game, too, Davante Adams is there, but they've been one-dimensional, getting the ball only to him, Josh Jacobs out of the backfield, a little bit of Jacoby Myers, who missed a game, obviously, with a concussion as well. When you look at the matchup, you on both sides, both fan bases, if I'm a fan of the Raiders, I'm like, okay, Chargers are weak against the run. We got to get a run game going. And if I'm the Chargers, I'm saying, well, these guys aren't moving the ball at all, so this should help us. And if we can key in on Davante Adams and he's not going anywhere else with the ball, then we should have a good day. What do you see with this matchup and the advantages and disadvantages on the Charger side?
Yeah, it's a great, question and great thought. And, you would think when you look at all the weapons or, I never want to sound offensive, but or lack thereof that the Raiders have currently, you would think that they would be able to, kind of key in on Davante Adams, whether it's a double team, whether it's playing more kind of zone and having a nickel guy over the top or just keeping your safeties deep or whatnot, and at least able to slow him down, which even in years past, they've had some success in not completely stopping him, but, keeping him somewhat in check, if you will. And then basically being able to key in on this run game as that I think would be the biggest factor in kind of moving the ball on this overall defense. And another big thing, Scott, that I think helped last week in the secondary particularly is the first 2 weeks they were kind of going through this 4-man rotation in corners, and Ja'Sir Taylor was kind of the unquestioned starter, and maybe people are surprised by that, but he was kind of your unquestioned, more kind of your slot nickel corner. And then Asante Samuel Jr., Mike Davis, and JC Jackson were all kind of vying for those final 2 spots. So they kind of were doing this rotation. And in football, any position you play, you really truly need, consistency. You need to get that lather. You need to have that reliance on who's going to be next to you, play in and play out. And we saw that, particularly in that Titans game, that miscommunication and that Treylon Burks deep ball that, allowed them to come back and tie that game. And it was just a total miscommunication on the back end. And last week, JC Jackson was a healthy scratch, whether that was for off the field stuff that came out or just football reasons. They stuck with their 3 guys. And I think it showed a subtle improvement. So I think having that consistency will help. And if they're able to have that consistency going against a dynamic receiver like Davante Adams, it will at least allow them to keep him in check. Again, you're not going to fully keep him out of the stat sheet. When push comes to shove, I will always take Davante Adams over a corner, probably to take over a game, but I think they'll be able to at least keep that in check and then really turn their focus on Josh Jacobs and that run game. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I think that's kind of the necessary evil of what they'll have to do.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I mean, you look at the other side of the ball now, the Chargers and the offense going against this Raiders defense, which, the Raiders defense overall not performing well, especially up front, not pressuring the quarterback. They do have some nice pieces. The Nate Hobbs matchup with Keenan Allen will be one to watch. It'll be fun to watch, I think. But you look at that and you say to yourself, okay, the day that Justin Herbert had in Minnesota, coming home to face this Raiders defensive front, He's got to be licking his chops a little bit. And I know these two teams, no matter where they are in the season, no matter where their rosters are, for some reason they always seem to play close games. The teams always seem to play down to one another, whoever is a better team at the time. It's really interesting to me. But talk about this offense. If they do get Eckler back, which it's iffy, right? To your point about him practicing at least limited. What is this like for them? Are they salivating? Are they just ready to go with this one?
Yeah, Scott, I think you kind of have to be, and you see what this offense has been able to do throughout 3 weeks. Certainly that hasn't been the overall issue for this team. I thought Justin Herbert's played really well last week, as we alluded to, 40 of 47, 405 yards, 3 touchdowns. Hasn't thrown an interception yet this season. And, again, like kind of said in the very beginning, if you can get the running game going a little bit too, it just adds another facet to this offense that makes it so dynamic. And what everyone talked about in this offseason, adding Kellen Moore, why there's so much excitement around this team and the potential of them being a true Super Bowl contending team. So, looking at this Raiders defense that, I think at times has played well, but maybe hasn't played an offense of this necessarily firepower. And you see what you get with Keenan Allen, these past 2 weeks has been unbelievable. Now, the big thing that we haven't mentioned yet is obviously the big loss of Mike Williams, going down.
Yes.
With ACL injury, out for the year now. And when Quentin Johnston was drafted in the first round, when Darius Davis was drafted in the 4th round, going to QJ first, there was a lot of chatter. Is this kind of the Mike Williams replacement? Now, I thought they size-wise were the same, but I think they have enough differences. QJ's a little faster, a little better route runner, can do more stuff kind of out of the backfield than Mike, but they do have similarities, I guess, in play style and size. So this is your first true test in, okay, this draft pick may have not been to replace, but it certainly was to assist in if this injury were to happen, which unfortunately Mike Williams has had a pretty injury riddled career so far in the NFL. So, he's been, he hasn't been involved in the offense, Scott, in terms of, pitches and showing up in the stat sheet, but he's been involved in terms of actually being on the field, running routes. His yard per separation is one of the highest in the league. So he's been getting open. He's been doing everything right. For whatever reason, Justin Herbert's basically just been thrown to Keenan Allen. So now though he'll need to kind of look Quentin Johnston's way and be able to utilize him, just because, he's missing that other big body of Mike Williams. And then the other guy, Joshua Palmer, who basically became pseudo wide receiver 1 last year when both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were both injured, and played well, but just wasn't a true wide receiver 1. It was kind of unfair for him, but now he'll kind of slide into that wide receiver 2 spot. And so far the season has played well. And, I don't expect this offense to, this is no disrespect to Mike Williams, but I don't expect him to miss a huge beat just because of the talent and the depth they built in that room for situations like this to occur. So,
yeah,
typical in Chargers fashion, already big injuries early in the season.
Crazy.
But we'll see how they overcome going against this defense.
Yeah, Parham at tight end too is doing well as well. Just a nice player, I think. And for folks in my fantasy leagues, they keep picking him up. So anyway, you look at that. Hey, the last thing I want to talk to you about is not to do with the football side of it. It's to do, again, with the stadiums. Now, this is what's ironic, because you've been dealing with answering questions about the Chargers and the fans and all that kind of stuff since they moved back to Los Angeles. But what's interesting, and I'm starting to see this all over the country, not just in these 2 venues, but last week for Sunday Night Football in Las Vegas, Raider fans, and last year, very upset because so many opposing fans are coming to Las Vegas. Surprise, it's Las Vegas, right? If you're going on a road trip with your buddy to see your favorite NFL team, where are you going to go? You're going to go to a nice destination spot, whether it's Los Angeles with a nice new stadium in SoFi or Las Vegas, of course. So it's happening. Now we're going to Los Angeles to see the Raiders play, and it's going to be, 50%, 60% Raider fans. Now you saw this past Saturday night, Ohio State and Notre Dame. 40% of the people at Notre Dame Stadium were wearing red. As this secondary ticket market has gone crazy with money, you're starting to see this all over the place, and you're seeing it in Los Angeles. Do you guys, are you seeing it more with the Rams too, or is it more so the Chargers, or is it kind of a mix of the two?
Oh, it's a very even mix. Rams fans would admit that, but if you saw the Niner game just last week, and any Niner game here, it's all red. So, part of it's to do with the market, part of it's to do with no teams here for 21 years. Part of it's to do with, when you just talk about Raiders and Niners, there was a huge culture here in LA when there were no teams. And so those were the teams that fans, kind of flocked to, if you will. And so, that doesn't just stop overnight. Rams and Chargers have been here now 7 and 6 years, I believe, respectively. So it's going to take, a generation almost to kind of change that. But to your point, and this is my biggest kind of grievance to this conversation, and not at all to you, but just nationally, is for whatever reason, when this comes up as a conversation, it really only gets brought up as a LA problem. And then now Vegas is kind of getting in that fold too. Yeah. But it happens everywhere. I mean, the Niners took over Pittsburgh in that first week 1 game of the Niners-Pittsburgh game, and Pittsburgh is a stalwart NFL city. So fans just travel now. It's just the way it is. Whether you live there or not, fans travel. LA is a little different because fans actually live here. I mean, I live by more Niner fans than I do Rams fans. I live by more Raider fans than I do Charger fans. I mean, that's just the way Los Angeles, the fabric is still in LA, is just the way that people lived here for 21 years. I moved here in 2008. There were no teams here for 8 more years while I lived here going to college. And so we would go to Niner bars, or we would go to Bronco bars or Seahawk bars. So it's just the way it was. It takes time. But I just don't get why it's always only an LA and Vegas conversation, but you see it everywhere. I mean, even the Cowboys see it in their stadium in Dallas. So
yes.
It's just the way it is now.
And it's interesting because when you talk to fans, they get so upset about it. And I understand why, because you love your team. You want your fan base to show out and have that home field advantage. And I'm actually working on a story up on sportsnot.com about this whole thing nationwide, because you're right, Ryan. It's not an LA and just a Vegas thing. You're starting to see it in college football, in pro football, even in baseball, right? You go to some baseball games and you see it. I mean, I lived in San Diego growing up, so I used to see Dodger fans come down all the time because that was proximity. But you're starting to see it as people on a weekend series in any city in the country. If it's a nice city people want to go to, sorry, Cleveland, then you're going to see people show out. So it's really interesting. Last question before I let you go, and I know we kind of started with this a little bit, but you look at this game, obviously every AFC West game is big. Every game in the NFL is big, but it's an AFC West rivalry. It goes back to the AFL days. Brandon Staley, with all that has been spoken about his risk taking and all this stuff, what does he have to do? Is he on a hot seat at all here, or is the Spanos family okay with Brandon Staley as long as they don't get bounced and don't make the playoffs? What does his future look like and his longevity as far as his security goes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think he's definitely on a warm seat. It would have been hotter had he gone 0-3, but winning that game definitely cooled it a little bit and able to kind of get back to, focusing now on getting the first one out of the way. But no, it's certainly a warm seat. I said before the season started, Scott, I thought this was a kind of divisional round at least or bust. I don't think if they didn't at least win one playoff game, there'd be some real conversations about moving on. I've been a big Brandon Staley supporter. I think culturally he's done a lot of good things. Now, you can say the culture's changed, but when you look at how it actually happens on the field, can you really say it's changed? That's a subject up for debate. I personally think it has, but yeah, seat's definitely warm. The city and the fan base is very, probably 60% ready to move on. Now that can obviously change in 2 weeks if they win this game and go into their bye 2-2 and then win again. Like, that can change very quickly. We know how fans are, and rightfully so. But as of right now, I think that the fan base is a little more ready to move on, and not to get long-winded, but I think that more stems not even from wins and losses, but more stems from him being a defensive guy, and the defense is still having the biggest issues of this team. And so that's what's got to be fixed the most of the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, very interesting comparison here, too, because obviously Raider fans are about 80% want to get rid of Josh McDaniels already. And now Josh McDaniels, though, has a reputation that has preceded him. And not only that, but the Raiders are 1-5 over their last 6 games dating back to last year. So when you start to think about that, and oh, by the way, he's an offensive guru and your offense is 29th. So similar to Staley, just on the other side of the ball. So it's going to be real interesting to watch these two folks with Ohio roots. Of course, Brandon Staley went to the University of Dayton. It'll be interesting to watch this game. And either way, I think it'll be a battle. We'll see how it all unfolds. But we certainly appreciate you being with us. And we also make sure you fire Ryan. A lot of folks that follow the Raiders, although they hate the Chargers and the Rams, of course, they are USC fans or UCLA fans, LA fans, because there's so many Charger fans in LA that you need to follow. Let me get it out. Ryan Dyrud, LAFB on X.com. Man, thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll catch up with you down the road as the Chargers get to Las Vegas later in the season.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much. Always a pleasure. And keep up the great work. Glad to be working with you more.
All right. I appreciate that. All right. We're going to step aside. I'll get Mo back on, and he will join us for the final segment here of Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Also heard as you're listening to us over the radio on The Bet in Las Vegas. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It is time for the final segment here on this edition of Silver and Black Today. Moe Moton, Scott Gulbransen back with you. Mo slides back in. Want to thank Ryan Dyrud for being with us. LA Football Network, also part of the Sportsnaut family now, by the way. So welcome to him and the team over there. Great. If you want to learn anything, not just about pro football in Los Angeles, but they cover USC. In fact, Ryan's going to Colorado this weekend to cover the USC and Colorado game, but check them out at LA Football Network. Good stuff. Mo, we talked there about the Chargers, and you heard some of the conversation. Obviously, their offense and what they're doing. Austin Eckler's still up in the air. We don't know if he's going to play. He's been out for 2 games, but Justin Herbert is just doing things out there on the football field that the Raiders should be worried about. The offensive line for the Chargers, while they haven't been great for the run, they are tied with the Raiders on pass protection of the quarterback. They're giving him time to wheel and deal. When you look at this team, and let's start there. Let's start with that Charger offense against this Raiders defense, which is still trying to find itself. What worries you most?
Giving Justin Herbert too much time, which was my worry last week against the Steelers, which is my worry against Josh Allen, which is my worry against Russell Wilson. The Raiders still have to find a pass rush. I know they signed Malik Reed, who's a former Denver Bronco, to the practice squad, but Malik Reed hasn't been productive for a few years now. And the one thing I will say, and I put this in my Sportsnaut column on Thursday, which you can read, it's up now live. The one thing I did like about the Raiders defense against the Steelers is that Malcolm Kuhn started to flash a little bit. It was the first time in that game of this season that the Raiders had another defender other than Max Crosby with more than 2 quarterback hurries. So in the first 2 games, it was Max Crosby and other guys were like 1 quarterback hurry or 2. Malcolm Kuntz had 3 quarterback hurries against the Steelers. So I know it's a small step. These are baby steps, but I'm hoping that the light bulb is starting to go off in his 3rd year. So that's what I'll be watching to see if Malcolm Kuntz can take another step. I know he got nicked up in that Steelers game, but I'm looking for him to take another step because the Raiders reduced Tyree Wilson's role. A lot of people were asking me on my Bleacher Report Live after the Steelers game, where was Tyree Wilson? Well, he only played 11 snaps. That's probably why I didn't see him.
He played 11 snaps, but you got to give him credit because I did watch that film and he looked better. I'm not saying he's anywhere near he needs to be, but I think if we go back and you listen, you roll back the tape on this show, if I'm correct, Mo, I think you said by week 4 or 5 that you would take a more critical eye view on him. Isn't that correct?
When Matt Holder was on with us, I think we all agree that by mid-season is when you can kind of start to dissect his game and be like, this is where he should be. I think within the coming 3-4 weeks, it's going to be crucial for him in his development because now it'll be like a month or 2 into him just having experience on the field, being on the pro level and getting those snaps. But I think for now, the guy that you want to pay attention to is Malcolm Kuntz and hope that Tyree Wilson eventually overtakes him and takes most of the snaps because the Raiders still desperately need a pass rush. And if you give Justin Herbert time, just like any other solid, good, above average quarterback, he's going to carve you up. And the Raiders are going to have to, regardless of what happens, the Raiders are going to have to score points. And I said at the beginning of the show, they haven't scored more than 18 points in the game yet. So if they're going to beat the Chargers, it's going to have to be in the 20s. We'll see how they get there.
I would think so. And I mean, Justin Herbert, 40 of 47. Now, I'm not saying the Vikings are the Dallas Cowboys on defense, but still, 40 of 47, that's damn hard to do. You're throwing that many passes and you only miss 7. That's pretty crazy. Of course, the Chargers lost Mike Williams, but they still have Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer, absolutely, who did a great job last year stepping in for them. So it's going to be a full day. The one thing I will say this too about Mo, and we didn't have a chance to talk about this yet, which is what I saw the Raiders and Patrick Graham do last week because of the lack of pass rush and because of the double teaming on Max Crosby. They moved him around a lot. I don't know if you noticed that watching the All-22. They moved him around a lot, which sucks because they shouldn't have to do that, but they are to try to free him up a little bit. It seemed to work a little, Against the Steelers, I think we're going to see that again. Unless Malcolm Kuntz comes out and just is blowing people away, that Charger line, especially on the left side, is pretty dang good. So they're going to have to do something creative. At least you see them trying to make adjustments there.
They had him shooting those interior gaps a lot.
Yeah.
Right through the middle of the Steelers defense. What I will say is that's a sign of how bad the interior of the Raiders defensive line is when it comes to getting pressure on the quarterback. If you have to move Max Crosby over the center and guard, that tells you that your defensive tackles, your interior guys aren't getting the job done.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We switch sides of the ball now, offense. We still don't know. I mean, late Wednesday, the word was that Jimmy G still in the protocol, but progressing. I don't know what that means. I guess that means that they have some hope that he'll come out of the protocol and be able to play Sunday. What's interesting here, though, and of course, I did a silver and black blitz yesterday on Aidan O'Connell and the fact that if Jimmy G can't go, then you need to start him. But we're hearing a lot of indications, even though at the press conference yesterday, someone asked, Josh McDaniels said, hey, in the past when this has happened, you've gone with the younger player. Are you going to do that again? Kind of basically is the gist of it. And he was non-committal, but we're hearing a lot that it would be Brian Hoyer. You're with me on this, right? And most of Raider Nation, that if and I think you talked about it on your Bleacher Report Live last night, actually. If he can't go, if Jimmy G can't go, why not put the kid in there?
Right. What do you have to lose at that point? You know, I know the game, but is Brian Hoyer really going to go score for score, drive for drive against Justin Herbert if the Chargers offense is rolling? No, he's not.
Yeah.
We already know what Brian Hoyer is. He's a journeyman backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Who's 1 or 2 years away from retirement. We don't know what Aidan O'Connell is. Who knows? Maybe Aidan O'Connell has a great ceiling. What if he is a starter in this league? We don't know yet until you put him out there on the field. And I say let the kid sink or swim against the Chargers defense that isn't very good either. Like I'm one to talk because the Raiders defense, we've seen it, but the Chargers pass defense is one of the 3 worst pass defenses in the league. This is a good time to put your rookie quarterback out there. You're not putting him out there against the Steelers or the Cleveland Browns defense. Yeah. You're putting him out there against the Chargers defense that's giving up a lot of points. Why not roll the dice with the kid?
And Mo, they've given up almost 800 yards to wide receivers this year. You think Devontae Adams is licking his chops if he has a quarterback back there? But the thing with Hoyer, this is the last thing I'll say about Hoyer, because I know Raider Nation doesn't have any love for the guy, and it's not his fault. He's a good dude and a good person to have in the locker room. But the difference is, look, you start Aidan O'Connell. If Aidan O'Connell struggles, like really struggles, you still have Brian Hoyer to put in the game, right, before it gets out of hand. I mean, you could still do that. But also Brian Hoyer's value is if you have Jimmy G, this is why he's the number 2 quarterback. And let's say you're out there and Jimmy G gets hurt and it's a close game or you're up by a score, he can manage the game. He's going to come out there. He's a wily veteran. He's calm. He's not going to freak out. He's not going to have turnovers. And that's what he's there for. So to me, this is a different situation. If Garoppolo cannot go and he goes with Hoyer, to me, that'll be like, wait a minute, you traded up to get this kid. Why would you not try it out? So we'll see what he does. Unless Garoppolo does get healthy in time for Sunday, which could happen.
2 things. So I just looked it up. The Chargers are getting up the most passing yards of any team in the league. That's number 1.
Told
right?
you.
Play the kid. Number 2, my reasoning for playing Aidan O'Connell is not just, he's probably better than Brian Hoyer. It's you find out what he is because long term you figure out, do I have to draft a quarterback in 2024? Right. Is Aidan O'Connell good enough to be our starting quarterback beyond the 2023 season? And again, the only way you're going to figure that out is if he plays a football game.
Right. And also, as I said yesterday on the Blitz, sometimes that young gun comes in and just gives you a new energy. Like we saw it in the preseason a little bit, but it's preseason, so it doesn't count. It's sometimes you just that weird change of pace. We saw it. There's some guy in New England who took over for Drew Bledsoe. Same thing kind of happened at first. Now, he went on to have a great career, but even at that moment, we've seen it a million times where that can happen. And so it would be interesting to see it. It seems like he's got the respect of the veterans, even though he's a young guy and unproven. And so we'll have to see if that's what they decide. All right, Mo, go ahead. You have something else to say?
really quick, even if you don't want to go the Brady route because Brady's just an anomaly. Look at what happened with Kirk Cousins and RG3 when RG3 was banged up. Kirk Cousins took over, 4th-round pick. Look at what happened with Tony Romo and Dak Prescott. Tony Romo banged up, hurt his back, I believe. Dak Prescott takes over. So we're not saying that Aidan O'Connell is going to be Tom Brady, but we're saying that if he could be a starter, a solid starter, it's a start for this Raider team, especially if he's taking care of the football better than Jimmy Garoppolo is right now.
Especially for the future, because everybody, including Jimmy Garoppolo, know that he is not the franchise quarterback moving forward. He is the guy right now. And if you have a quarterback in O'Connell who goes out there and plays and shows that he can be a top-line starter, and I say top-line starter, meaning as a rookie, be in the middle of the pack and then rise to become better and be your starting quarterback for the next several years, then that's huge for you. That means that you went down in the 4th round and got a guy who's going to start in the NFL on a rookie contract, by the way, which is great, and you can go fix the rest of your needs because you got lots of them. So I'm fascinated to see what happens. Now, this could all be moot because of Garoppolo. And listen, I want Jimmy Garoppolo to be healthy. I don't want anybody, especially with a head injury, I don't want anybody to have a head injury. So God bless him. I hope he's okay. And he plays. If he plays, though, and he doesn't play well, then what? Then there's the other question, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Mo, what's going to happen with this game? I cannot pick the Raiders in a game at this point because I just can't see past what I've seen the last 2 weeks. So how can you now? I think they'll score points against the Chargers, but then I thought they'd score points all season. They're 29th again, so I don't know what's going to happen with this game. If I had to pick it, I would say the Chargers probably going to win by 10 points. And I know all the people will say, well, it's because you grew up a Charger fan. Bull crap. It just is what it is. Do you see it? I mean, how are they going to stop that offense?
This is what I had on my Bleacher Report betting column. I think the Chargers going to cover. It was 5.5 in favor of the Chargers when I put out the column. I had the score as 30-21. So I also think the Raiders are going to score points.
Yeah.
But I do think they're going to lose by, close to 10 points. I had to lose it by 9, but the positive side is they score points. The negative side is they take another L and Raider Nation loses their you-know-what in the post game, and everyone's yelling, fire everyone, because the Raiders lost in their second home. But I'll say this for the people out there listening, understand that the Chargers, while they have a head coach who's very questionable, I like Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator, and I think Kellen Moore is starting to unlock more of Justin Herbert's abilities, and I think Justin Herbert, had he played with a winning team, he would be talked about more as an MVP candidate because he's playing at that level right now. So understand, you got Justin Herbert on one side and you have a big question mark for the Raiders quarterback on the other side. The Raiders just going to looks like the Raiders are going to be outgunned on Sunday, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's tough to see it. Anything can happen. Maybe this team wakes up. Yeah. I mean, I'll walk into it with 10% of my brain thinking, okay, maybe they wake up, maybe Garoppolo plays and suddenly he becomes at least closer without the supporting cast, the Garoppolo in San Francisco. And maybe, look, the Chargers run defense is awful. So if Josh Jacobs doesn't run against the Chargers, Mo, we're going to have a really tough conversation next week, because if there's any team you can run against in the world, it's the Chargers. They're terrible against the run. Even Ryan said that in the last segment. They're not good against the run. They can't stop it against bad running teams. Minnesota.
Scott, the Steelers were terrible against the run.
Yes. Not as bad as the Chargers. Yes.
I'm just saying, look, I sat here with you last week and I was fairly confident that the Raiders would be able to take care of the Steelers, their struggling offense. And for them to put up the performance that they had Sunday night, it made me look like an idiot. Because here I am telling people,
me too.
The Raiders offense is struggling, but the Steelers offense is worse. Kenny Pickett goes out there and has his first multi-touchdown passing game of his career against the Raiders. and it's just like, what are we doing? Josh McDaniels goes out and kicks a field goal inside the Steelers' 10-yard line, which we spoke about at length before we got on here. And that still burns my biscuits, whatever you want to say. It's just not winning football. And for it to end up like that against a team, again, that was struggling to score points like the Raiders, and now you're going against a quarterback who's playing well, how am I supposed to sit up here and tell fans, have faith that the Raiders are going to pull it out against a Chargers team that's putting up a lot of points? Have faith against a Chargers team that's one of the top scoring teams in the league when the Raiders can't even score 20 in a game. I can't do it. I'm not going to lead fans astray. I'm not going to blow unicorns and rainbows up people's buttholes. Not going to do it. This is an objective show, and I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think the Raiders are going to come out with a win. It doesn't add up unless Aidan O'Connell is that dude. It's not going to happen.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
And listen, it's always better for us. So for those of you who wonder, and I've said this before on the show, we don't, because of podcasts, we don't have ratings like radio does. We have basically downloads. And so it would be better for us to be all rainbows and unicorns, even when things are going bad, because then the hope would be that more people would download the show. But we don't do that. We keep it real. And the feedback we get, of course, from most people is that's why they listen to us. So we're going to keep it that way. We're always going to be that way. And I had a lot of people come at me on Twitter or X this week saying, "Oh, remember when you were optimistic?" And I'm like, yeah. Well, guess what? I was wrong. Imagine being wrong, Mo. There are people in the world that are sometimes wrong.
Here's the thing. People will always find you when you're wrong either way. So that's why I prefer to just be honest. And I'll take the L if I'm wrong on something. Of
course.
Look, as I said last week, I got up here and I said, I think the Raiders are going to win the game. We had Jarrett Bailey who got up here. And as a Steelers guy said, I think the Raiders are going to win the game.
Yeah.
And the Raiders pooped the bed. And
Yes.
Josh McDaniels doesn't trust his offense. So how can I
Yes.
sit up here now and give fans confidence to say they're going to walk out with a victory on this one against a Chargers team that with their backs against the wall and still fighting to get back to 500? I can't do that. I'm not going to lead people astray. Not going to do it. Nope.
No, I won't either. It's so funny you said crap the bed because I said that to Corey on our PSF game watch on Sunday, and it was foreign to him. He didn't know what that meant. And he's like, actually crap the bed? I'm like, yeah. Now we're Raiders Uncensored on that channel, so we actually can say the words. But it was too funny. It was too funny. Anyway, hilarity ensues. All right, my man. Let everybody know. I know you have a Bleacher Report live after the game. You have one on Friday too, or what's the deal?
No Bleacher Report live until after the Raiders-Chargers game, so I'll be with fans right after the game to break it down. Whatever happens. I know I just got up here and railed how I can't sell you rainbows and unicorns, but I will say I have a positive Sports Night article up saying there are 3 things that I saw in the Raiders defense against the Steelers that I actually liked. And of course, this goes with the theme of the season of what does Mo want to see more of? And there are 3 things that I want to see more of. If you want to know what that is, check it out on Sports Night. The article has been tweeted or posted on X, whatever you want to call it. So if you want some positivity, you can head over there and look at what the Raiders did well on defense against the Steelers.
Now, you said you have no problem taking the L when you're wrong, right?
Right.
I don't think that's true because you still will not accept the fact that ketchup doesn't go on hot dogs. It's just you won't accept it. I've shown you evidence. The response is overwhelming against you, and you still won't take the L. Overwhelming.
You said when you put up those questions, you sent all your non-ketchup, anti-ketchup minions after me. To filibuster that whole thing and think that you're gonna get away with that. Listen, there have been so many posts. I think there was one. I think it was Mike McCarthy who works in the NFL office posted a hot dog with ketchup
at a high
and
school
mustard.
game. Yes, because he was going to hand it to his 8-year-old.
Look, ketchup and mustard can coexist. I don't mind
yes.
ketchup. Okay, so what's the difference if it's on a hamburger and a hot dog? What's the difference?
Well, we'll save that for another conversation. All right. You have that. By the way, Mo's positive piece on Sports Not about the Raiders defense, check it out. That ran this morning. And then this afternoon, I had the opposite side, which was negative. So if you want a little yin and yang, I just talk a little bit about what was said this week and how the Raiders are underperforming and we got the Garoppolo flop, all that stuff. So you'll get both sides of the coin. See, it's called evenness.
Not to drag it out, but our guy Stoic Raider on X said I needed a stiff avocado shake or smoothie after our last show because he could tell I was down and angry after the Raiders lost to the Steelers, especially with the decision that Josh McDaniels made. Stoic Raider, if you listen to this show, if you're listening, let me know where I am on the angry to down sad meter with you.
There you go. It's better than what I had. So and by the way, you can catch Mo post game, as he said, on the Bleacher Report Live app. We'll have our post game show too after that. But then During the game, Corey and I will be back for our second show. Corey had some technical issues to start out too, but we got it all squared away. And the problem was I was drinking bourbon when I was doing the thing with Corey because Corey's doing other things, right? Yep. And by the time I got to the post-game show, I had some people on YouTube that are like, have you, how much have you had to drink? And I'm like, not that much. Come on, guys. I think it was just because my face was a little more red since I had some alcohol, which we obviously don't do when we do this show, but it was fun. But we had fun on that app, man. We had some good folks. Raider 27, who's on our YouTube channel all the time, was on there. A bunch of new folks coming on, so it was good. It was good fun, and we had a lot of fun. We had some strange conversations, as you can imagine, but everybody seemed to enjoy it. So make sure you download the free Pro Sports Fan app wherever you get your apps, and join us throughout the game. It goes by fast. It was good watching the game with Corey. You know, usually I'm in my own little studio here working for Sports Not, covering Sunday football. And then for the Raider game, I'm by myself. I'm texting you and Evan most of the time during the games. And now I get to sit next to Corey online and chat with people. It's pretty funny.
Shout out to Big Corey for bringing out Saucy Scott for that show.
It was
brought the saucy version of Scott. I like that.
It was 125 proof barrel strength bourbon, man. I probably should have went a little lighter. Sitting here by myself, drinking with Corey, watching Raider football, and then going on and doing a show and writing a couple articles. So there you go. But it worked. It was fine.
Sounds like a good time.
It was a good time. All right, my friend. We will next talk to you on Tuesday, and we'll see what happens on Sunday. It'll be interesting weekend leading in, and we'll find out about Garoppolo pretty soon. But as always, a pleasure, my man.
Sounds good. Hopefully I'm in a much better mood, right? Stoic Raider. We'll see.
He's stoic. He's thinking about Marcus Aurelius, you know? That's what he does. I love that guy. Anyway, he's got a great handle and good stuff. Okay, for our producer, Mike Robier, who we thank very much for all of his hard work. For Moe Moton, I am Scott Gulbransen. This has been Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast and heard on the Bet in Las Vegas. Raider Nation, hang in there. Enjoy the game as much as you can. Sunday, maybe they'll surprise you. And we will be back on Tuesday. Take care.